Hello everyone, here's Muhammad Imran. This is lecture 2 in the subject literary criticism. In lecture 1, we had an introduction to literary criticism. We had also an introduction to Plato as the first literary critic and the first critic of literature. Plato was against poetry. He says in his book The Republic that there is no place for poet in his ideal state. So when he was designing his ideal state in the Republic, he wanted to kick out poets from his ideal state. So today we will discuss what were the four grounds on the basis of which Plato wanted to kick out poets from his ideal state. Let's begin today's lecture, Objections Against Poetry by Plato. So these are the four grounds on the basis of which Plato was against poetry. So the first ground is metaphysical ground. On the basis of metaphysical ground, he objected poets and poetry. And the second ground is moral ground. The third one is also moral ground, while the fourth and the last ground on the basis of which he criticized poets is inductive ground. So we will discuss one by one in detail now. Plato says poetry is an imitation of imitation, thus twice removed from reality. So he thinks that the things of this physical world are already an imitation. So what does a poet do, or what does an artist do? They do imitation of imitation. Thus they are twice removed from reality. So for Plato, art is an imitation and so does poetry. So poetry is an imperfect imitation of an imperfect imitation, thus twice removed from reality. It is the world of shadows and falsehood. He gives four arguments against poetry. We shall consider why Plato kicked out poets from his ideal state. So we will discuss now those four grounds on the basis of which he says that there is no place for poets in his ideal state. The first argument is based on metaphysical ground. So Plato's concept of mimesis branded poetry as an unreliable source of truth. So the first argument he gives is in metaphysical ground. He says that only idea is real. According to Plato, what is real? Only idea is real. And the world of nature is the imperfect copy of the world of ideas. That is what he thinks, right? So he says that poets are slavish copies of the world of things. That's according to Plato. This world is a world of things. So we have, in our surrounding, we have things in the physical world, right? So he said that he means all that we perceive through our senses are things. For example, whatever we touch, whatever we see, and whatever we feel. So what does an artist do? He imitates the thing of this world. For example, a painter paints thing. He draws a portrait. So it is an imperfect copy which falls short of things. So what does a poet do? A poet does the same thing, but he does it through words. And so does a novelist. Right? So a novelist also draws picture through words, and a poet also. So poetry is conceived with words picture. So pictures, whether they are painted or word picture, are imperfect copies. So poets give us an imperfect copy of an imperfect one. So they go distant from reality. If a poet gives us an exact copy of a thing, it is still. Even if a poet or a painter gave us an exact copy, still we can say away from reality. Why? Why does it so? Because things have freshness, right? And because and beauty which life gives to them. But the copy doesn't have that freshness and beauty. We have things in our surrounding. For example, we have tree, we have flowers, right? We have rivers, we have people. So we have things in our surrounding, right? And these things have freshness. These things have beauty. And this beauty is given to them by life. But the copy doesn't have that freshness and beauty. For example, when a poet draws something through words, or when a painter does something through his pencil, right? So the things don't have that freshness and beauty. So things have a purpose and use. For example, trees have a use and purpose, but the copy of a tree has no use. The man and the women we find in sculptures or the imperfect copies, they fall very short of the man and women of this world. That's why he says, okay, that even if an exact copy is copied, still we can't say that there will be freshness in the copy, right? So this world of thing and the world of art and poetry is itself not real. This world is an imperfect copy of an idea. The things which we see with our eyes are perceived through our senses, animals, trees, people, etc., or in the process of change. That's okay what he says, right? So everything changes. So they are in flux. They are and are not at the same time. So everything changes with the passage of time according to Plato. So for Plato, our physical world of becoming is but shadows, reflection, or imitation, mimesis of unseen world of being. Now you can see here, he says things of the world change, so can't be real, right? So whatever we have in our surrounding, they constantly change. So if something changes, how it can be real? This is his question, right? Thus everything in our world from object to ideas is but a pale copy of the perfect one. So then what is perfect? Perfect is only an idea. Okay? So unchanging originals or forms of these objects and ideas, they dwell above the unseen world. So where something original live, that live above in the unseen world, and that is original, that is idea according to Plato. Things we see are in the process of change. So some of the things quickly change while some of the things slowly change. But everything in our surrounding is in the process of change, right? So if things are unreal, then what is real? According to Plato, idea is real. So senses are not perfect, but reason tell us what is real. It tells us what ideal is, right? So he says that senses are not perfect because we touch things and we feel things, we smell things, so we have different senses. He says that it is a reason which tell us what is hot, what is cold, what is fragrant, and what is smell. So it is our reason that distinguishes things, right? So reasons are not perfect, but that senses are not perfect, but reason tell us what is real and it tell us what ideal is, right? Further he says, we see things come and go, but ideal is always there. So the idea of man and the idea of horse is there. It does not change. What is the idea of man? It is permanent. And what is the idea of horse? It is permanent. And the horse we have in this world is in the process of change. Or the man we have in this world is in the process of change. Today you are a child, tomorrow you would be an adult, and then you would be a man, and then you would get old, and finally you will demise. You will no more be in this world. So you are in the process of change, right? So the idea of man is there, that is permanent, while the man we have in this world changes, and the horse we have in this world changes, while the idea of a horse and the idea of a man is permanent, right? That's what he thinks. So when a poet describes a chair or writes a poem about love, he is not imitating the form of the chair. So a writer is not imitating the idea of the chair. But what does a writer or what does a poet do? So a poet or an artist imitates what? He imitates the worldly chair, which is a copy, right? So an artist or a poet, they do not imitate chairness or love, which is written in capital, that is for idea, right? So a poet or an artist, a poet imitates love of this world, and an artist imitates cheer of this world. An artist does not imitate cheerness, which is the idea. An artist does, and poet does not imitate love, which is the idea, but the earthly imitation of this idea, cheer and love. Right? That's why he says that's twice removed from reality. So poetry, therefore, because it imitates what is already an imitation, is twice removed from reality, the form. As such, it is an unreliable source of truth and can only lead astray those who study it. So if you study poetry, it will astray you. Right? It will not guide you, because poets are twice removed from reality. They are slavish copyists. They copy things of the world, and things of the world are already a copy. So if you are making copy of a copy, then you are twice removed from reality. So what is real then according to Plato? That is idea. An idea dwells where? Above in the unseen world. Right? We haven't seen the idea. So ideas are permanent while things change. So if things change, then how can you copy the things? That is okay. What is his philosophy? So I hope you got it, okay? Or what he means by this. So he says that the idea of a man cannot be stout, because all men are not stout. So idea is that which is common to all men. We have different men in this world. We have different women in this world. So we have different things, but the idea, that is a single one. That is one, right? So he says that we see trees and every tree is different from every other. And we see man and every man is different from every other. Yet we call them trees and we call them man. So to the there is nothing common in them, but reason tell us to call them trees, and reason tell us to call them man. So the idea is real and it does not undergo a process of change. Idea does not change. What changes? That is thing. Thus the world of idea is real. The things are not real. They are the copies of ideas, right? Every horse is a copy of an idea, an imperfect idea. So Plato says that the world of things is once removed from reality, and since the artists copy the world of things, therefore their world is twice removed from reality. This is his first argument regarding poetry and art. This is very difficult to understand. So this is the theory of ideas, and this is metaphysical ground. Now we will discuss Plato's second argument, which is also on moral ground. So he says poetry appeals to emotions, and there are three parts of personality, right? So every human being has three aspects of personality, right? So on the top, according to Plato, is cognition, which is reason, intellect, right? Wisdom. And on the second top, there is cognition, that is willpower. And the last one, which is the lower aspect of human personality, that is affection, related to emotions and feeling. So that is okay based on ideal state. In his ideal state, he says that there are three parts of personality of every human being. On the top, cognition, reason. Second top, that is cognition, willpower, to act. And the third one, that is affection, that is the weakest aspect of human personality. And it is this part which is attracted by poetry, right? That's why that he says that there is no place for poets in his ideal state, right? So this part of personality, which means power of thinking or reasoning and the intellect of man as well as of woman. So the second aspect that he talks about, that is cognition or volition, which means the willpower to do or to act upon, right? So the urge in man which makes him do something, that is called cognition. So it is the active side of man. And the third one, which is affection. It means the feeling aspect of human being, the emotional and sentimental aspect of human being. So of these three, Plato says the first, that is rational part of human personality, is the highest. This one is the highest. Second comes the willpower, right? This is the willpower, right? And the lower, then cognitive aspect, that is the lower of all these, that is affection one. And it is the worst aspect of human's personality. What part do they play in a good man? This is a question. So poetry appeals to the weaker, inferior side of our mind, soul, or psyche, right? So three aspects of human personality he talks about. Highest, that is cognition, reason, intellect, rational. Second highest is cognition, willpower, and the lowest is the affection, feeling, and emotions. So what do they play in a good man, right? In a good human being? He's talking about these three aspects of human personality, right? This is his question. Okay, we will deal with this one, right? So who is morally a good man? According to him, a good man is he in whom reason governs, right? So you are a good human being if you are governed by a reason, whose deeds are directed by reason. Reason must guide their willpower. If they disobey reason, then they are doing something bad. So the willpower, the second one, should carry the order of reason. Here we have reason, and here you have to follow the order of reason. So he says that emotions and passions, the third one, are evil and must be controlled. So if reason rules a man, then he is a good one. This is his picture of good human being. But that man in whom emotions and passions dominate, who is a creature of emotion, is a bad one. So if you read a poetry, he means, right, because poetry appeals the lower aspect of human personality, then this aspect gets dominated on the reason. Then you don't think, because you have you bring this aspect to the top and this aspect to the lower. Okay, so then what happens? Then you become emotional, right? You are sentimental, and you are not governed by reason, but you are governed by emotions and feelings. So then you are a bad man. That's, I don't say, it is said by Plato, right? So let's discuss this in some more detail. Corresponding to this definition of a good state and a bad state, all of us have reason. So we know that we have reason. We have also willpower, right? We have also emotions because we are human being. But in some, reason is more powerful than other, and we call them philosopher. So if you have more reason, then you are philosopher. That's according to his philosophy, right? So there are others in whom the willpower is strong. They are men of action, and we call them soldiers. If you are man of action, then you are soldier. The second aspect. Then there is the last member of people who are ruled by patience and emotions, right? And we call such people as businessman or businesswoman, workers, traders, and farmers. So these are like on the lower rank according to him. So the philosophers are the highest in the state, the soldiers come next, and the businessmen are the lowest of all. So an ideal state would be that which is ruled by philosopher. The soldiers obey the order of philosophers, and an ideal man, the reason rules. Similarly, an ideal state, philosophers rule. So, as an ideal man, emotions are kept under control. So, an ideal state, the traders, businessmen, etc., are kept under control by soldiers. So, soldiers are the man of actions, and they use their willpower to keep the businessman under the chain and prevent them going out of control. So in his republic, we have the rule of philosophers, and soldiers are there to carry out the order of philosopher. If we have this in Pakistan, it will be an ideal state, but we don't have this in Pakistan. So poetry appeals to the lowest aspect of man. It appeals to emotion. So to use the words of Plato, it feeds and nourishes the emotions, and so strengthens them. So patience becomes stronger, and then reasons that lead to moral disharmony and degradation. So then what happens? So what poetry doing is poetry good or bad? So what is poetry doing? Is good or bad? It's bad according to Plato. So Plato said that stimulating the lowest part in man is not good. So poetry is morally harmful. Its influences is bound to be bad. It corrupts society. It leads to destruction of character of man. This is his second ground, which is based on moral, right? So here we have Plato's third argument, which is also based on moral grounds. He says audience identify themselves with character, and their personality is lost by imitation, because we follow our favorite actress and actresses, right? When we go to theaters and we watch dramas, and in modern times when we go to cinema and we watch movies, or we sit in front of TV and we watch our favorite dramas or plays. So what happens? We follow our favorite actors and actresses, their styles, the way they talk, the way they eat, the way they dress, the way they think. So we lose our own personality and we become someone else. By imitating them, we become someone else, which is harmful for our personality. We don't have our own personality. We don't have our own identity. We become someone else. That's according to Plato. By watching movie or reading poetry, audience identify themselves with one of the character. They forget themselves and consider themselves to be someone else. In Greek time, it also happens. So in Greek dramas, one character had to perform different roles, and he used masks for different, because that time women were not allowed to perform on the stage. That's why these women would use different masks to perform different roles in plays, right? So this is a third argument, that you lose your personality by watching dramas or reading poetry, because in poetry, in epic poetry, there are also characters, and you identify yourself with one of the character. In this way, you lose your personality. The last and fourth argument of Plato, that is inductive. Homer at the top, but not good, other would not be good. So he takes one example of Homer and he generalizes it. He says that Homer is one of the top poet of that time, ancient Greek time. And if he is bad, then what about minor poets? So all are bad then. So fourth argument is inductive, where he draws a general conclusion from specific fact. Greek believe that poet is a teacher. That's according to Greek, that poet is a teacher. So Plato asks what we find in the best of poets. Homer was considered the greatest teacher and poet, but what do we find in his poetry? We find gods fighting, they taking side, they show favor to some and disfavor to other. They do sorts of things which consider wrong. The same is true of heroes. They are higher than us. We look up to them. They get angry and try to harm to the people, the gods involved in human affairs. This is the lessons of Homer's poetry, he says. So if we find such kind of lessons in Homer's poetry, then what about Miner's poet? So this argument is based on inductive method. He takes a particular example and generalizes it. Aristophanes, the first literary critic, was asked the question, what is the function of poetry? It's not fiction, function of poetry. It's a typo mistake. So he answered that the function of poetry is to give good consoles, to impart wisdom, and to make people good sons, father, husbands, and better citizen. So poet is a teacher, is a traditional view. Plato says that from Homer, it's not Plato, from Homer, we expect good poetry. If this is a kind of teaching he gives, if this is the function of poetry, what we find in Homer's poetry, what must be teaching of inferior poet. So this poetry is morally wrong and we should get rid of this, right? So Homer was not good, then Miner's poet also be not good. So Plato says he has no place for poetry in his ideal republic, ideal state. He feels sorry to expel poets from it because he had a great love for Homer. He loved Homer, right? He found great pleasure in reading Homer poetry, but he says the truth and reason come first. Look, he was a philosopher. So he had love for Homer, but he says what comes first? Reason comes first and emotions and feeling come second, because he thinks that on the top we have reason, we have intellect, we have rational, and lower aspect is the affection. So first come what? Reason. Whatever he feels would be secondary. So he says he would not insult the poets. It's not bold, it says it is not, right? So he would not insult the poets, he would garland them, but he would not let them his ideal republic, because their world is removed from reality, right? So he would welcome them, right? He would appreciate them, right? But he would not let them to live in his ideal republic, because they are twice removed from reality, right? So I hope you got the idea. He says he would garland them, but he would not let them in his ideal republic, because Plato thinks what comes first, that is reason, and reason tells him that these poets are away from reality, twice removed from reality. That's why that he would not let them in his ideal state. So thank you so much. It was all about Plato and his 4 arguments that he developed against poet and poetry. So in next lecture, we will discuss Aristotle's reply to Plato 4 arguments. Please don't forget to subscribe and like the channel and give your valuable feedback. Thank you so much.